Hello everybody, welcome back. Now I'm going to explain about HTTP session interface. HTTP session interface is an interface given in Java x.servlet.http package. Whenever first time the browser is sending request to server, then server creates a session ID and session object and stores the ID into that object. Before creating session ID and session object, first server verifies whether the request is given from an existing or a new browser. If the request is from new browser, then the server creates an ID and object. As a servlet programmer, if you want to utilize the session ID and object to maintain the session tracking, then we need to get that session object from the server. In order to get the session object from the server, we need to call the get session given by HTTP servlet interface. And we can use any one of the following three statements to get the session object in the servlet. HTTP object equal to request dot get session, or HTTP session object equal to request dot get session of true, HTTP session object equal to request dot get session of false. In the above three statements, the get session and get session of true are same. Whenever these two methods are called, then the container of the server first verifies whether the client is a new or old one. If the client is a new, then creates a new session object and returns that session object to the servlet. If the client is existing or old one, then returns the session object of the client to the servlet. In the case of third statement, that is get session of false, the container or server returns the session object if the client is an existing, otherwise the server returns none. So the difference between get session of true and get session of false is for new client, the get session of true creates a new session object, but for get session of false, it returns none. And accordingly, okay, like when the data given by the client at the first request and second request is stored in the session object. And when a client is giving third request to servlet, then the servlet is using the first and the second request data also for processing the third request. It means servlets will store the data and reads the data from the session object whenever required. The data stored in the session object is alive until the client session ends. So a session can be defined as the time interval between login and logout. So whenever we enter email ID and password and we click on login, then a new session starts. And if you send the request to the server any number of times until we say logout, the server will treat that client is existing. And when we say logout, the session ends. If we again enter email ID and password and click on login, then another new session will be started for the client. In HTTP session interface, Servlet API has provided some methods for storing and reading the data in a session object. In a session object, data will be stored in the form of key value pairs, and we can call data as attributes of session object. And in Servlet API, there are three objects which are supporting attributes, that is request object, context object, and session object. So this is about HTTP session interface. Now I'm going to explain you with an example. So first create a dynamic web project with the name HTTP session. Then inside the source folder, create a package, and then there are two servlets created here, HTTP session 1 and HTTP session 2. And inside web content, you have an index.html, and inside webin, you have a web.xml. So this is again the same thing. This is servlet 1, this is servlet 2. And the URL pattern for servlet 1 is session 1, URL pattern for servlet 2 is session 2. And inside the welcome file list, we have an index.html file. So first you go to index.html file, right click on the application and say run on server. Select the Tomcat server and select the particular project as HTTP session and then say finish. So here it is asking for the name. So enter the name and click on this button go. Then it says welcome Scott. And if I click on the visit, it will say hello Scott. So this is about the HTTP session. So hope you understood, and I'm stopping here. So continue in the next class. Thank you.